Hello, and welcome to this session on cleaning and disinfection. There are so many aspects that are essential in the prevention of the spread of COVID-19, as well as other pathogens in long-term care settings. It is important that our employees from all departments understand the role of proper cleaning and disinfection and how it plays, especially now during this pandemic. Today, we will be covering some of the key strategies that will be important to share with your employees at this time.
We will talk more about the importance of updated policies and procedures in a few slides, but they are crucial for direction for the staff. We will also be talking today about choosing and using appropriate cleaning and disinfectant products. We will be talking about the importance of education and competency when it comes to both cleaning and disinfection of the environment and equipment. Return demonstration is going to be essential for our staff on PPE use, how to choose and prepare disinfectants, how to clean and disinfect. Ongoing auditing and re-education when opportunities arise will also be important as well.
The Director of Nursing, Housekeeping Supervisor, Administrator, Infection Preventionist, and Building Services leaders can work with your vendor to identify the proper cleaning and disinfecting products necessary. For COVID-19, EPA registered List N against SARS-CoV-2 is the approved disinfectant list that should be used during this pandemic. If you go to the EPA website and click on List N, you will be able to search the list of registered products to choose from. It is essential that the facility choose products from this list for proper disinfectants for other pathogens as well. For example, if you have residents with C. diff, you should be choosing List K for antimicrobial products effective against C. diff spores. Again, using the proper product will be essential in the spread of infections in your facility.
The use of PPE appropriately is essential. Whenever any employee will be cleaning and disinfecting the environment, surfaces, or equipment, choosing the appropriate PPE or personal protective equipment will be a key component in the process. Education, proper signage, a system for exceptional communication, and ongoing reminders to all staff in all departments will be crucial for success. We want to make sure we are protecting both the residents and the employees. We need to remember to remind all employees in all departments to ask the nurse if they are unsure or if they have any questions, and to set that culture for it to be comfortable to be able to ask questions in order to provide that environment for success.
And next, of course, and this is a very important point, perform hand hygiene. This can be accomplished in two ways. The preferred way, unless your hands are soiled, is to use alcohol-based hand rub. Use enough product to be able to cover all aspects of your hands and fingers and rub vigorously until dry. If you are using soap and water, remember to wash your hands for at least 20 seconds and be sure that your hands are completely dry, or it will be difficult for you to put on PPE with wet hands.
Now we're going to discuss that very important aspect of both cleaning and disinfection. The environment plays a crucial role in the prevention of the spread of infection. It is important to identify exactly how this virus spreads in order to find every way possible to prevent transmission in the facility. Cleaning and disinfection practices will be essential. All departments must follow the facility cleaning and disinfection policy and procedure directions whenever they're working in the facility.
As Sue said, policies and procedures are essential in order to give staff good direction. It is important that we provide solid education on our housekeeping policies and procedures that are specifically related to cleaning and disinfection. Our housekeeping policies and procedures should provide direction to staff for the horizontal surfaces that are within the room and in your organization, Looking at carpeted surfaces as well, and other surfaces such as doorknobs, handrails, light switches, and other cleaning areas and those surfaces. Terminal cleaning, as we all know, is very important that we have a solid policy and procedure in place. Schedules, and that's talking about the schedules for day-to-day cleaning, for cleaning and disinfection, as well as for the weekly cleaning and routine cleaning that we need to have. Again, having solid schedules in place to make sure that we're cleaning and disinfecting the appropriate surfaces in accordance to the current guidance. Our cleaning tools and having policies and procedures around those cleaning tools. Trash removal, hand washing locations, hand washing facilities, our isolation rooms, handling of chemicals, as well as overall safety. And of course, the most important part, another aspect, is making sure we have solid policies and procedures in place for medical equipment cleaning.
All germs have the potential to live on items or surfaces, but different types can live longer than others. For example, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, indicates that C. diff can live on surfaces for up to 5 months if they are not cleaned and appropriately disinfected. Hepatitis B can live for over a week. Norovirus, it is said, can live anywhere from hours to a week. With COVID-19, a study was done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in collaboration with the CDC and indicated that COVID can last hours up to even days in the lab setting. However, because this is a very new virus, they are not quite sure how long it can last in the real life setting. The droplets can spread and disperse 6 feet or more and will settle rather fast. If cleaned and disinfected with the right disinfection, COVID-19 virus can be killed.
So understanding the difference between cleaning and disinfection is important to all staff in order for them to make sense of what they are doing. So cleaning means removing any foreign material, dirt, blood or body fluids, or other organic matter. Disinfection, on the other hand, means that you'll either eliminate or destroy the microbial life or, for example, the viruses or bacteria. If you do not clean the item or surface properly, removing the foreign material, the disinfectant process may not work appropriately.
As we discussed earlier, using EPA registered product for disinfecting will be essential for the prevention of the spread of any pathogen. As Lisa indicated, EPA List N against SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 is the disinfectant that should be used during this time for disinfection with COVID-19. A few questions that we want to ask ourselves. Do you know how to use it? Have you been educated? Do you know how to dilute if indicated? Are you following the directions on the label? Imagine what could happen if you dilute the product and it isn't intended to be diluted. It won't be effective. Imagine what can happen if you make it too strong. It could be damaging to the items you are disinfecting, right? Are you labeling correctly? Do you put the name of the product and how it is diluted? Do you date and time the product? Some products are only effective for a certain period of time. Once you have diluted your disinfectant, label the diluted cleaning solutions appropriately with the date and time and how it was diluted and the product. Next, can the disinfectant be used on all surfaces or items? We're going to need to check with the manufacturer of any surfaces or items that we're disinfecting. Are you aware of safety with disinfectant use? Can the resident be in the room? Do you need special protection yourself, such as eye protection and gloves? And make sure you have adequate ventilation. For employees with asthma or other respiratory conditions, you will need to be sure if it is safe to use cleaning and disinfecting products, even with respiratory protection. We also must remember to always follow the manufacturer's recommendation for the equipment we are cleaning and disinfecting.
We need to be sure to check our policies and procedures for housekeeping to be sure that we're following the proper directions. So with COVID-19 or any outbreak, we will want to make sure that we increase the frequency of those routine cleanings that we're doing, including, of course, as we know, are the bathrooms and around the residents' living space. We need to also make sure that we pay particular attention to cleaning objects that are, that are frequently touched, what we call our high touch objects or items, such as faucets, and those faucets can be in the resident bathrooms as well as congregate bathrooms, door handles, those light switches, and light switches not only just in resident rooms, but light switches around the organization, bedside tables, the remote controls, telephones or cell phones, toilets, and also the overall sink areas in multiple locations.
Another crucial component to that solid cleaning and disinfection program is to specifically assign routine cleaning and disinfection duties. When it comes to COVID-19, it is so important to dedicate staff to the COVID-19 units. If for some reason you are unable to do this, we will need to prioritize to, first of all, request nursing staff that are already dedicated to this unit to clean and disinfect. But if we do that, we will need to educate them and ensure that they are competent and that they have enough resource time, because resources are essential or they won't be able to clean and disinfect. Next, if dedicated staff are not an option, they must first provide cleaning and disinfection services to the non-COVID unit first, next a quarantine unit, and followed by lastly the COVID-19 positive unit.
Displayed here on the slide is an excellent resource that you can download, laminate, and use for any staff in any department that is related to cleaning and disinfection in their area. So let's quickly review the steps that are outlined in this handout. The first step is that we check that our product is EPA approved. So we find the EPA registration number on the product, and then we have to check and see if it's on the EPA's list of approved disinfectants. And again, we know it's at epa.gov, and then we're looking right now for COVID-19, it's list N. Second step, of course, is read the directions that follow the product's directions. So we have to make sure that we're checking the use sites and surface types to see where you can use this product and how to use the product. And again, also to be able to read those precautionary statements, when to use it, not to use it, and what surfaces not to use it. Step 3, pre-clean the surface, as we talked about cleaning, to have appropriate cleaning in place so that in order to have appropriate disinfection. So again, we need to make sure that we wash the surface with soap and water if the directions mention pre-cleaning or if the surface is visibly dirty. Step 4 is following that contact time. And again, how important that contact time is for the overall kill rate of the virus or the infection. Step 5 is wearing your gloves and washing your hands. And again, making sure that we follow appropriate PPE donning and doffing protocols as it relates to cleaning and disinfection. And of course, it's very important with step 6 is locking it up, making sure that we're closing the lids tight and that we're storing it out of reach of residents in our locked cabinets.
Here are some strategies for cleaning and disinfection. We want to be prepared with the proper cleaning equipment and supplies, and you will need multiple cleaning cloths for each room. So we want to start with the surfaces that are the cleanest first. Then we go from top to bottom approach. Next, cleaning cloths should only be used in one room. We should never put soiled cleaning cloths back into a cleaning bucket, and mop heads should be changed after each room. We also want to make sure we're using caution to prevent the gown from touching resident care items.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has provided some good recommendations about the coronavirus disease for healthcare workers and that interim infection prevention and control recommendations for all of us as healthcare personnel during the COVID pandemic. So some of the recommendations include what we see here on the slide. And this isn't anything new, but again, it's a good reminder for all of us that we need to remember that we use dedicated medical equipment whenever possible. And if not possible, that we need to make sure that we have good, solid policies and procedures, and we clean and disinfect prior to use with another resident. Another recommendation is always follow the facility policies and procedures. Again, the importance of having good, solid policies and procedures that are up to date with the current guidance. And remember, we need to have that plan in place for us as well as the education plan for our staff as it relates to those policies and procedures. And also a good reminder for us is remember to first clean, then disinfect. And again, with COVID-19, using EPA List N disinfectant. And of course, we also need to look at laundry, food service utensils, and as well as our medical waste that we need to make sure that we're managing it through our routine procedures and policies that we have in place.
A few additional tips to remind employees include, don't forget under the table where residents put their hands or the chairs. We also want to make sure that we look at activity equipment and supplies after each use. And then of course, the nursing stations and office. So when we're looking at keyboards, pens, and common areas, this is a time where we may want to investigate keyboard covers that can be disinfected in order to prevent any damage to the keyboard from any disinfecting products. Here's an example of a cleaning and disinfecting audit tool that can be used as part of your facility process surveillance in order for you to be able to identify staff compliance with guidance and facility policy and procedure.
So in summary, environment can play a key role in the prevention of the spread of infection, including COVID-19. Therefore, having a solid program will be instrumental for success. That solid program includes, as we discussed today, policies and procedures that are based upon current best practice approach, having appropriate choice of product for COVID-19. This will include disinfectants from EPA registered list N, staff education and verification of competency as it relates to cleaning and disinfection, auditing for compliance, as well as conducting remedial education and incorporating all your processes into quality improvement. We would like to thank you very much for attending this training. And remember, you can always ask your supervisor if you have any questions. Even one break in practice can potentially cause a serious transmission of COVID-19 for both you and the residents and your staff. Therefore, we want to do it the right way and get it done the right way first. Again, thank you today, and thank you for sharing time with us today, talking about appropriate cleaning and disinfection.
Great. That was a nice presentation from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And I just wanted to at least follow up, and I don't know if Kelly and our other mentors have any comments about the video presentation. However, one thing that struck me was the issue of storage of chemicals or disinfectants. And so OSHA basically requires that you not stack them up above head level. You know, they have to actually be lower than that. And there may be some specific state guidelines too that you need to worry about. But if you do a survey of your facility and you find boxes that are stacked up above, a 5-foot level, that could be an OSHA violation. So you need to be aware of that. And then also just to comment on the creating a culture of improvement. So that one element is to do shared cleaning duties. You know, so I know as an example, I just saw this the other day in my clinic where the director of the clinic was in a room and giving it a once over there with the disinfectants. And so I think that kind of represents that leadership will take on duties. It's sort of called servant leadership, and that's just so valuable as leaders to do that. I even watch my colleagues, as physicians, some who adopt this and some who don't. And quite frankly, it would be nice if those that don't adopt, this sort of servant leadership approach and helping with the, it could be just spritzing the doorknobs, after a clinic visit or cleaning it up afterwards, or alternatively, like I just to share with you my own observations, at least in the clinical setting, who actually cleans the pulse oximeter after it's being used on a patient. And you'd be shocked as to how frequently the providers forget to do an alcohol or other disinfectant swabbing of that little piece of equipment that's posted on one of the hallway walls, in our clinic. So we just all have to be reminded of that. So I'm going to turn this over to Kelly Marks for our case study and quality improvement discussion. So Kelly.
Thanks, Dr. Jarovich. And I do have a couple of points I wanted to follow up on the video as well. You mentioned OSHA, and it popped in my mind. Please ensure, as you have new disinfectants that you're using specifically to fight COVID, that you have MSDS sheets available for them, so you know what to do should you get contact with the skin or eyes, mouth, whatever. And the other note, OSHA related, is make sure your eye wash stations are up and functioning appropriately. You have appropriate signing, and that your staff is aware of that. I think we've brought new things in, and then maybe here's an opportunity to revisit, like the eye wash station. Do you know where it is? Do you know when you're supposed to use it? If you do inhale the disinfectant, do you know what steps to take? And that's what those MSDS sheets are for. So just a reminder to take a look at those things. A couple of other thoughts I had on the video is I did not hear them talk specifically about handrails or privacy curtains. And those both are very high touch spaces, especially as your residents now probably are coming out of the room a little more because the positivity rate in the facilities has declined significantly, and really in a lot of communities it has. So I think that you need to take another look at that and make sure that that you are including those in your cleaning practices. The other note, I know that visitation is starting to slowly but surely start opening back up. And with new people coming into the facility, please reiterate to your staff those cleaning and disinfecting practices as those folks come in, because even if they're sitting on either side of a plexiglass, that still needs to be cleaned and disinfected. If you have a sign-in sheet in your lobby when folks come in, you need to have fresh pens or somebody cleaning that area too. So just a couple of thoughts there. And then I have to laugh. I saw this pop up on my Facebook earlier. It says, I just fired myself from cleaning my house. I don't like my attitude, and I got caught drinking on the job. And the reason it made me laugh is because in these high positive communities, your families are out in the community, going to the grocery store, going to work or whatever. And so we have to remember, we not just disinfecting the area that you're in at work, but also that you need to be disinfecting your home, because you have so many folks coming in and out from the community. So that popped up and made me think about that. So anyway, we can move on to QI now. You can go, yeah, perfect. Okay, our case study this week is about activity programs. And we know with COVID-19 that our typical activities are not the same. Now, fortunately, as things starting to loosen up a little bit, we may be able to reintroduce that. But this particular case study discusses the memory care unit and how live music and dance programs have been such an enjoyment for that group of residents. And they would sit next to one another in a small circle or common area. The staff member would play the piano or a guitar and sing old songs that were favorites for the residents. Residents and staff members would dance and hold hands and stand close to one another. Now, obviously, with COVID-19 spiking, those type of activities went away. And so I have a couple of follow-up questions. And Julie, are you on? Do we still have the poll? associated with this? If not, we can do it just, I can ask the questions and we can do yes or no in the chat.
I don't have the poll for this today. I'm sorry, Kelly.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just had it in my notes section on the slide deck. So I pulled up the chat here and I'm going to ask a couple of questions just to see what you guys have in place. And all you have to do is respond yes and no, just to get an idea of what you all are doing. One, with the pandemic, have you adapted your activities program? Yes, I felt like that would be an overwhelming yes. Everybody has had to make adjustments to your activity program based on this. I know I have facilities I'm working with now that are trying to get more group activities started again and really evaluating how they can maintain that safe distance, how they can disinfect between activities and still have some more social events. Do you have designated staff to observe activities to ensure that appropriate distancing and PPE? Yes. Lots of yeses again. Yeah, and I know that staffing is a challenge overall during this pandemic. And so how can you use your resources the best in order to still have folks observe these activities and then also be able to keep the quality of life for the residents the highest it possibly can be? The next question I have is, do you have a policy for sanitizing common areas following each of these group activities if you have started using those? Yes. Perfect. So now what we're going to discuss is you have a policy, you have adapted your activities program, you have someone observing the PPE use. Now, how are we sure that these policies, programs, systems you've put in place are reliable? So let's start talking about quality improvement and how to determine the reliability of some of these systems. You need to focus on your process. How do we know if our process is reliable? And what do we do if it's not? So you will hear me reference the 5 questions or the 5 attributes throughout this program. I think this is a very useful piece of quality, or a useful quality improvement tool, is when you're trying to determine the reliability of a process. Interview 5 staff, ask them these 5 questions. Who does it? When should it be done? Where is it done? How is it done? And what is needed to do it? By asking these 5 questions to 5 staff, you will be able to determine if the system you've put in place or the training you've conducted for this system was reliable. You want to be able to sustain performance over time. And if staff can answer these questions for you consistently and appropriately, then your system is reliable because everyone is aware of how it works. So you also need to make sure, if the process that was put in place, say folks can't answer these questions right, is it a common failure or is it an infrequent failure whenever they aren't responding appropriately? And if it's common, then you need to look at, okay, how can we adapt this into a performance improvement plan? This system is not successful for whatever reason, and then start working to create that performance improvement plan. And when you're working on a performance improvement plan, the best way to put an appropriate intervention in place is to work with the staff. You can take those same 5 staff. Why is it they didn't understand the system that was in place to begin with? How was the training conducted? If you talk about, I use hand hygiene as an example a lot because that is a big point these days. And a lot of people, their hand hygiene training was not successful because they had no return demonstration. So the staff would read a piece of paper, but they weren't physically doing it and they weren't retaining that information. So if you talk to the staff and interview the staff, you'll really be able to determine what needs to be put in place to make your system reliable. And you can put that in a performance improvement plan and then monitor its success. You always want to set a goal whenever you're doing these things as well. If it is an infrequent failure, then it doesn't mean that you have a bad process. There may just be something that's not perfect, so to speak. So just talk to the person that was consistently unable to answer those 5 questions and try to drill down why they misunderstood or misinterpreted the training or system that you had put in place, and then move forward. But it's very important, just reiterating again, to include the staff when you're evaluating these systems, because they are the front lines. They're the ones that's closest to the issue 9 times out of 10. And so they are going to be able to provide the most valuable input as you're determining the reliability and putting a system in place moving forward. Well, we can go to the next slide. I think I covered all these now. I just maybe skipped ahead a little bit. So as I mentioned before, how do we know if the process is reliable? You ask the 5 staff these 5 questions. So if you're talking about observing the PPE and distancing during an activities program, who is doing these observations? When are they doing it? So somebody had said on the chat, it was the activity director. When are they doing it? When there is a group activity, where is it done? They're holding group activities in the common area. How is it done? There is maybe the activity director has a census or a roster, a resident roster, and they're checking off, yes, those folks are wearing their PPE appropriately. And if there's that one resident that absolutely refuses, how are you addressing that? Are you moving them to a little bit further away? Are you providing them with maybe a face shield instead to have some kind of barrier? What are you doing for that person? And then what is needed to do it? So if you need certain tools or resources, and like I said, if they have the resident roster and a clipboard and a pen, that may be it. And if all staff can provide consistent answers, there's a high likelihood that your system is reliable. We can go to the next slide. And what do we do if it isn't? If you have a process that does not work well, determine, once again, if it's common or infrequent. An observation of one person does not mean it is a common failure. Like I said, talk in depth with that person to try to determine why it is that they didn't understand the system. And it may be a simple fix for that person. Maybe they just missed that day that you did the training on it. It could be as simple as that. And so it's not necessarily a system failure. It's just that one person misinterpreted the situation or was unaware of it. And with the multitude of changes that you guys have had to go through over the past year, I know there is an opportunity for some folks to miss a training or two whenever you're going through this process. Go to the next slide. Perfect. So after today's session, I encourage you all to look at your COVID response. You can look at your activities program. You can look at your disinfecting policy and cleaning policy that we, excuse me, just watched the video on. And then go around and ask your staff those 5 questions. Find 5 staff, ask the questions, and see if you can determine if the policies that you have put in place are consistent. Many of you said you have adapted your activities program. You have put a policy in place of who disinfects the common areas during activities and observes safe distancing. So you've put things in place. Now let's take a look and see if those systems are reliable. And then if they are a common failure, whenever you look at it, then you can work towards a performance improvement plan in order to get that back up to par. And that is all I have on QI today. If there's any questions, you can drop them in chat or unmute yourself, and I'm happy to talk through them.
So Kelly, I was just going to ask, how frequently would those 5 questions be done? Is that something that could be done daily or weekly? I mean, how much of a habit should that be? So as I mentioned, whenever we first started with this group, my background is as an administrator, and had I had those 5 questions in my back pocket, I would probably include it in my daily rounding. And it may not be on the same system or the same policy,
but just use it as a consistent talking points with the staff. Now, whatever works for each facility, or if you put something new in place, maybe you do it for a week. Talk to 5 staff each day for a week during rounding to determine the reliability of that process, and then move on from there. But I think if I was back in the facility, I'd probably use it on a daily basis during rounding, because I think it's a really good way to get a feel for what the folks understand.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And really just maybe one unit. It doesn't have to be all the units. So if you just get your 5 people, you're done for the day, for gathering that information for sure.
And just as I mentioned, guys, we've done 2 cohorts previously, and I feel like I bring those 5 questions up in a lot of sessions, because I think it is a very good tool. And if you want, I believe these sessions are on the Dakota Geriatrics site, and you will be able to see that 1-pager that we showed on one of those slides that goes through that reliability process.
Good. So Kelly, we have a question whether the people that are being asked, are they any employee or specific departments?
I think that varies on what system you're trying to determine reliability of. And if it is a housekeeping specific system change, then maybe you're asking just the housekeepers, but ask 5 of them. And 5 is, I can't quote a source, but 5 is the number that they say, as long as you can ask 5 people and you determine that the majority or understand, then it's considered reliable. So I think it really varies, but say it's about hand hygiene. Excuse me, if it's about hand hygiene and every department is responsible for appropriate hand hygiene, then do a mix of your departments.
Yeah. And so the other question is, can we share the link? Absolutely. All these are posted on our Dakota Geriatric website. The other thing is being able to distribute the tool. So they have that checklist tool for cleaning. I think we can send that out as a separate cover. Technically, what you can do is you can copy your screens from the computer. There's you hit the Control Window S, but we'll send you those materials out for sure, and they will be posted. Good. All right. Well, thank you for those questions. Why don't we wrap up here with our summary? So we can have the next slide, please. So some of the key takeaways from today is that we want to ensure basic practices are being done to prevent the spread. This will create a safe work environment. And we want to incorporate all of this infection control into our QAPI process. Next slide, please. So here I'm just asking if you can list in the chat box your most recent quality improvement project for infection control here in 2021. So just give you a few seconds there to list what you did for a PIP in 2020. Great. So we have one indication here of auditing PPE, donning and doffing. That's good. High touch surfaces, good. Monitoring the cleanliness. I'm just kind of curious how you do monitor. Is it by inspection or is it by other means? Implementation of UV light usage. Well, yeah, that's good. So nice to see that the slide, my first slide there, had the UV disinfection. That's good. Yeah, so a lot of monitoring hand washing, and then PPE use. Yeah, so these are perfect, and so the PIPs should be revisited like in 2 to 3 months later. So you just continue on a cycle with those and do short spot checks. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for that input. So can I have the next slide, please?
Kudos to you all for doing for all of these responses. That's great. And any of these PIPs that you guys have put in place that you would be willing to share with the group, we're happy to let you jump on next week's session and share these.
Yeah, I think that's important about lessons learned. You know, this worked pretty good, or this one was a little tougher to roll out for whatever reason. So yeah, thanks. If you can share your, if you have it written down on, you know, a PIP that you actually did, either using our QHA tool or your own tool, if you can email that to us, that would be great, and then we'll, you know, go from there in terms of discussion. So walk rounds are so important. So going into the residence room, also the bathroom, also include the walk rounds for kitchen and laundry, and using that structured checklist that we showed you earlier in the video is really, really a good idea. And we'll get you a copy of that. Next slide, please. Enhanced communication. So just, I don't know if you have a communication plan, but that might be a good idea as to how you're going to periodically remind people about things. But also it's important to give feedback to both the residents as well as to family members. All of this is to create a culture of accountability and that everybody's involved in this process of infection control. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, the dwell time, I've got that circled there in the middle. Here you see quaternary ammonium has a dwell time of 10 minutes. So hopefully all the staff and anybody that does engage in any type of disinfection processes, that they understand the dwell time, and that could be, you know, part of those 5 questions. You know, what is the dwell time for this particular agent, or for diluted bleach, as an example. And also knowing the surface type here, you can see the example here of, this is then this EPA N list of where rinsing is required after the use of quaternary ammonia, whereas there's no rinse when you use hypochlorous acid. So those are 2 different things. And one has a rinse and the other one does not. So again, just understanding that from the both the label from the manufacturer, as well as cross-checking that with the EPA N list. Next slide, please. Yeah, and if you got that aerosol generating room, make sure that there's a signage up there. These are for things like nebulized treatments or other aerosolized procedures. So that you have signage there. Also have a sign that says the room is ready for cleaning after its use, and have procedures, you know, for addressing that specific room. Next slide, please. So we want to avoid in those patients that, for instance, have asthma or COPD. We would prefer not to have spray solutions. And then in cleaning the procedure room, is that we use moistened cloths rather than the spray solutions, and not to use preferably scented disinfectants. A lot of people have allergic reactions, and now that we're getting into the spring season, we're going to see a lot of nasal congestion. And guess what? Nasal congestion is associated with COVID. So we're going to have just so much, overlap here that we just really need to be aware of that, and minimize, things like allergies to scents or perfumes. Next slide, please. And we kind of address this, the long-acting antiviral solutions or materials. There's nothing like that. And so the bottom line is that you kill the viruses within that dwell time, but the next sneeze, body fluid or whatever, they're back again, and they're not going to be killed by that original cleansing. So sometimes that just needs to be reinforced. Next slide, please. So here's just a formula for preparing bleach solution. Bottom line is that bleach needs to be made daily. You can't, like, once you dilute the bleach, it doesn't work the next day. You can also use alcohol solutions, and the minimum is 70% alcohol, and that's the point of this slide. Next slide, please. And my favorite cleaning lady issue here, don't mix these 2 guys. that might be an emergency room visit. But again, just making sure staff are knowledgeable about not mixing solutions. I think that's close to the last slide there. Next, no, we got a couple more. Yeah, so for the CPAPs, soap and water, you can use vinegar solution. I just want to emphasize that vinegar solutions are not anti-COVID, so just be aware of that. And the other thing that's kind of, Kelly was mentioning about the room dividers and so forth. Unless they're non-porous surfaces, those room dividers, if they're cloth, they're the dickens to clean. There's no proven technology for the cloth, so you'd be better to replace those with vinyl or something that's non-porous, quite honestly. Next slide, please. And here's my moonshine buddy. What not to do is, again, homemade preparations, making sure everything's labeled and properly stored is one of the points made in this session. Next slide. And again, be mindful that a little extra shot in the evening doesn't keep COVID away. Vinegar doesn't work too good, and some people have advocated tea tree oil as a disinfectant. People use this as antifungals on toes. None of these are of any value, for COVID. They might have other medicinal values, but I won't mention those. Next slide, please. And just to show that there's, with these stadiums and stuff, that there's this aerosolized version. Again, this is all research, and doing something like this, even in the nursing home where you had an aerosolized process, not proven. But again, people are exploring this as an option, and I'm glad to see the drones here, since we're producing drones over in Grand Forks. Of course, the drones they make in Grand Forks are a little too big to fit into a stadium. They're the jumbo version. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then technology, having robots. Our program at UND, by the way, just bought a robot to work in long-term care. We're going to try and have geriatric consultations through this mobile robot. So stay tuned as we roll that out, or the robot rolls out. I'll let you know how our geriatric consults go. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I just wanted to talk about some of the things, this whole nasty thing about, bleach, and like people were drinking bleach, and oh my God, it's just like craziness. But I just want to point out that, one of the things that we recommend upon exposure to COVID is that people take zinc, because there is some evidence that zinc at 220 milligrams per day after exposure to a virus, not necessarily COVID, has some antiviral properties. And then the quercetins also help ramp up the immune system. So you can see all the food elements there that can increase quercetin, that has antiviral properties. So it's not probably too surprising that eat your fruit and vegetables, turmeric, all of these things are good natural inhibitors of COVID. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to wrap up by saying that it's kind of interesting as we get older, and you can see this graph here, that our body is not able to produce natural nitric oxide. It basically is almost non-existent by the time you hit 60. And so the two things that can really elevate nitric oxide in older adults is physical activity and polyphenolic foods such as beets. And we don't know how much is enough, but I just want to point that out again, that as foods can be used as medicine. The other thing that I advocate in food services is to ramp up legumes. So peas, soybean, and other legumes will help produce or expose older adults to the higher levels of essential amino acids, such as glycine and formate, that help activate the T cell branch of the immune system. So again, a little bit theoretical, but I just wanted to provide that information as to some small ways that shouldn't hurt, in terms of using foods as medicinals for fighting the COVID infection.